moved to Antelope because it was a green oasis surrounded by high desert country in north central Oregon. It was absolutely crime-free, beautiful, wonderful neighbors, and all hell broke loose when these people moved in.
All they cared about was being with the master.
In many ways, this place is unique, and we are going to make it more and more unique and beautiful.
Rajneesh met a 16-year-old girl named Ma Anand Sheela. She would later become one of his most important followers and the person who would later run this cult. Hello and welcome to the 3 AM Fear podcast. I'm Nikita Ferrao, mystery and thriller author. On this podcast, I talk about real crimes and real people. Due to the graphic nature of some of this content, listener discretion is advised. You can find the episode show notes on my website 3amfear.com. Let's get started. This is a cult case, a cult that is believed to be one of the most dangerous cults, but also one of the most active cults in India. A quick Google search will give you a lot of details about this cult, but after watching the documentary Wild Wild Country, which is available on Netflix, I started to question everything that I knew about this cult. In this episode, I'm just going to talk about the cult. I'm not going to add any political angle to it, and I want you to know the details as and when they happened. This is the cult of Rajneesh, also known as Osho. Throughout this episode, I will be mentioning Rajneesh as Rajneesh in the beginning, but after his followers started calling him Bhagwan, we will be referring to him as Bhagwan. And this reference is only because he is called as Bhagwan. Rajneesh was born as Chandra Mohan Jain, the eldest of 11 children. He was born to a cloth merchant at his maternal grandparents' home in a small district in Madhya Pradesh. His parents Babulal and Saraswati Jain would allow him to live with his maternal grandparents until he was 8 years old. Later on, Rajneesh would go on to say that because he lived with his maternal grandparents until he was 8 years old, they had a lot to do with his future beliefs. By that, I mean his maternal grandmother would give him all the freedom in the world. He could do whatever he wanted, he could play wherever he wanted, he could play with whomever he wanted. He was given a very carefree childhood. He believed and he would go on to preach that freedom is what people wanted. When he was 7 years old, unfortunately his grandfather passed away, and that is when he started to live with his parents. Rajneesh was unfortunately very badly affected by his grandfather's death because, as I said, his grandparents were very close to him. A few years later, when he was 15 years old, he would go on to lose his childhood friend to typhoid. That also impacted him a lot. In his school years, he was a very well-known kid because he was said to be very rebellious. He would go on to debate on multiple topics. He did not just take information as it was, he questioned things. He was not just interested in traditional religion, but he wanted to explore more, such as yoga, meditation, exercise, all these things. Throughout his young years, he was said to be a very active student. He played multiple sports. He was a very good student when it came to studies. Overall, everything in his childhood was normal. But all of this would soon change. After showing an interest in the writings of Marx and Engels, he was branded as a communist, and he was threatened with expulsion from school. It was said that he, along with a few friends, got together and created their own library with books relating to communist literature. Rajneesh would often get a group of people to come and sit with him, and they would discuss all these things. In 1951, at the age of 19, Rajneesh began his studies at Hitkarini College in Jabalpur. But soon after that, he was asked to leave because what he believed and what the university believed did not match. He was then transferred to D.N. Jain College, which was once again in Jabalpur, but there also a lot of problems happened. At D.N. Jain College, he didn't have to teach classes, he just had to look after examinations. On the part time, he worked as an assistant editor for a few months for a local newspaper. Around the same time, he started doing public speaking. Around the same time, his parents were pressuring him to get married. Rajneesh would go on to say that on 21st March 1953, when he was 21 years old, that was when he felt this first beam of enlightenment. He would go on to say that he was sitting under a tree in Jabalpur, and that is where he was enlightened. He graduated in 1955 and continued his education by earning a master's degree in philosophy. While studying, he also worked as a lecturer at a university. But his teaching style was different from the others. Instead of focusing on the curriculum, that is the standard philosophy lessons, he would share his own ideas about life. He had ideas about life, religion, capitalism, science, and birth control. Some people found these talks inspiring, while others thought that he was going too extreme. By 1960, Rajneesh had completed his master's degree, but his views were controversial. The university where he worked asked him to transfer to another institution because they didn't like what he was teaching. And even at this new college, he continued to teach the same way. He spoke about enlightenment, society, and culture, but all from his perspective, what he believed, not what was written in the textbooks. As time passed, he started attracting followers, especially among college students. Many young people were searching for a meaning in their life, some sort of a comfort, and that is exactly what he offered. He eventually shifted from being a professor to a public speaker. People were ready to pay money just to listen to him talk, and his influence started to grow. Soon he had a dedicated group of followers who were ready to go with him wherever he wanted and just listen to him. This was the beginning of the movement that would later turn into a large spiritual community. Over time, he would not just be teaching in the classroom, but outside the classroom. By 1962, Rajneesh was still working in the college, but he realized that he could literally make a living out of just talking. Even though he remained in the college for some time, it helped him attract new followers. And as his reputation grew, more and more people became interested in his spiritual ideas. Now, during this time, he developed his very own meditation program, which lasted anywhere between 3 to 10 days. One of his most famous techniques was called dynamic meditation. He said that it would help people reach a higher state of consciousness through intense physical movement and emotional release. His unique approach would make him even more popular because what he was teaching was not something that was widely taught. In 1966, Rajneesh would go on to resign from his job as a professor of philosophy from the University of Jabalpur, and he would go on this speaking tour. He would go all around the country and he would have these hour-long talks about religion as well as his political views. Now, it was not that he just woke up one day and decided that he was going to quit his job. The university was not happy with what he was doing. He refused to follow the curriculum of the university. He refused to teach exactly what the university was teaching. In fact, he wanted to push his own ideology. He wanted students to be more free. He wanted them to have this free life. But this is not what the university wanted. And when they came to know that Rajneesh was not teaching the students what was there in the textbooks, but rather talking about what he believed and what he thought was right, the university asked him to resign. And at 35 years old, Rajneesh resigned from his post. Rajneesh would go on to do exactly what he believed in, preaching to the people. By 1968, he had his own group of people whom he would preach to. Now, because he didn't have a location where he could have this gathering, he would have this gathering in his apartment. But as time went on, the group of people increased, and his small apartment could not hold that load. In that same year, Rajneesh met a 16-year-old girl named Ma Anand Sheela. She would later become one of his most important followers and the person who would later run this cult. She first heard about him from her parents, who took her to one of his meditation sessions. At that time, she didn't know much about him. But when she met him, she said that she felt an intense emotional connection. She started crying and said that she immediately felt drawn to him. Rajneesh embraced her, and from that moment on, she became completely devoted to his teachings. Over time, Sheela would rise to a leadership position in this movement, and as we go on, you will get to realize how much she impacted the movement and how much she had to contribute to it. And by all of this, I don't mean in a very positive way. One of the main reasons why he had so many followers was because he had a different type of meditation teaching called dynamic meditation. This practice had 4 stages. In the first stage, participants would be wearing blindfolds and then they would breathe rapidly through their noses. It was said that the whole goal of the blindfolds was so that people could focus on their breathing. In the second stage, it was all about emotions. People could cry, scream, shout at the top of their lungs. It was kind of a way for people to let out their emotions, scream out their emotions. They could do whatever they wanted without being judged. A way for people to get out this emotional baggage that they were carrying. In the third stage, participants would be required to hold their hands up in the air and jump up and down. And it was not just jumping up and down. While they were doing this, they had to chant. The whole goal of this was to increase their energy and help them reach a higher state of awareness. The final state was to be in complete silence. People could lie down and be in a state of complete silence. And after all these stages were over, people were encouraged to dance to disco music, which was popular in the 1970s. While Rajneesh was living in Mumbai, he developed diabetes, asthma, and several allergies. In 1974, he decided to move to Pune. He moved to a property in Koregaon Park, Pune, purchased with the help of Ma Yoga Mukta. Rajneesh would go on to speak at this ashram from 1974 to 1981. Even today, as people talk about Rajneesh, they would refer to this place, Pune, as the place where all of it started. It was not just one ashram, it was said that there were 2 adjoining houses. In the present day, this is known as the Osho International Meditation Resort. Initially, Rajneesh's audio recordings would be played throughout, and later on, video recordings. In the beginning, it was just his neighbors, and then people from all over the country started to come to his ashram to listen to him talk. But as time went on and the beliefs and talks of Rajneesh increased and spread, people from all over the world started flocking to this ashram. If you see the footages from that time, you will see that there are people from all over the world at that time listening to him talk. The ashram was not just a place for people to sit and listen to Rajneesh, but they also started producing their own clothes, jewelry, footwear, anything that was needed. Everything was done inside the property of the ashram. From 1975, the ashram also brought in a lot of therapists, and people could go and talk to those therapists. Now, the thing about the therapists is that people would not just go to a therapist and say, I need therapy. They would go to Rajneesh, they would tell Rajneesh what their problems were, and then Rajneesh would tell them, this is the therapist that you had to talk to. So it always went through Rajneesh. Initially, people started asking therapy for physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and all of this would go through Rajneesh. Now, one thing I want to mention about this ashram is that when it came to letting go of emotion, the step that I said, where people could let go of emotions by screaming, crying, jumping, whatever they wanted to do. During this process, some people also went into violent attacks. They would attack other people. A lot of people who left the ashram at that time, there were a handful of people who actually exited the ashram, and those people would go on to say that they exited with broken bones because someone else attacked them. Now, Rajneesh's whole teaching was that there were no rules. You could live your life however you want. Now, going back to his grandparents, with good intentions, taught him that he could live his life in a very free way. He could have his free will, he can play wherever he want, he can do whatever he wanted, and I'm sure that they meant it in a good way. But when he started talking and he created the ashram, he would let people do whatever they wanted, which also included physical violence. In 1979, the ashram would give out a press release saying that this whole violence therapy, where people could let out their emotions through violence, was stopped, and that it has served its purpose. Now, people just didn't come to the ashram to pray. Some of them who had been in the ashram for a very long time, they were known as sannyasins, and if they had served their purpose enough in the ashram, they could be promoted to a higher level. Basically, they would be living in the ashram full time. Now, the environment in the ashram was modeled on the community the Russian mystic Gurdjieff led in France in the 1930s. I hope I'm pronouncing it correct. I could not find the right pronunciation. So basically, it means that if you're going to follow this path, you're going into hard, unpaid labor. Supervisors who had this tough personality or rough personality, those were the ones chosen, and their whole goal was to make other people work so that they can find themselves. Despite all of this that was happening, many disciples would choose to live for years to come in the ashram. Other than the controversy about violence in the ashram, there were also rumors that there was drug use going on. But unfortunately, this was not proven. Now, the main question here was who was funding the ashram? Unfortunately, all those followers, the foreign followers who were flying into India to come and devote their time and energy, they were the ones who were funding the ashram. The ashram just didn't have any and all followers. There were doctors, lawyers, construction workers, any profession you can think of, they were there at the ashram. It was said that some members had even left their families for good just to come and serve at the ashram. At the commune, where people practiced dynamic meditation in large groups, everyone was required to wear shades of orange, red, or pink. This was said to be a part of the spiritual practice, and I would like to mention that it was Rajneesh who introduced this whole color code that people had to wear. Because later on, he would go on to contradict his very own statement. Whenever someone new joined, they had to take on a new spiritual name. Every person in that group had to change their name. So everyone in that commune had a different name than their birth name. The commune was located in Mumbai and quickly became a popular destination for those who were looking for enlightenment. People traveled from all over the world just to experience Rajneesh's teachings firsthand. In the beginning, Rajneesh wanted to create this beautiful place where people could come, live with love, no rules, no regulations, just love each other, respect each other, and live your life to the fullest. But as time passed, his views also changed. At first, there were no strict gender rules. It was not like women had to stay at home while men worked. Anyone could take up any job. There were no social hierarchies like you're higher than me or I'm beneath you, nothing like that. Everyone was equal. And it seemed like an amazing opportunity. People would help each other without expecting any money in return. And as said, there were people who were literally creating clothing, footwear, jewelry, everything inside the ashram. So people didn't have to go outside to get anything, or people didn't have to work outside the ashram to get anything. Everything was available inside the ashram. If someone needed a shirt and a person had two shirts, then that person would happily give one of his shirts to this person. When you look at it from that point of view, the Rajneesh movement seemed like the perfect place to live in. His goal initially was to create this world where everyone lived happily. But again, that was not what he ended up doing. Rajneesh did not believe in marriage. He didn't believe that two people had to get married to live with each other. He believed in free will, in free love. If you loved someone and you wanted to have sex with them, you can openly have sex with them. And that's why later in the episode, you will get to hear from a lot of people who didn't like the idea of walking along while they watched two people engaging in sex out in the open. Rajneesh also strongly supported contraception and abortion. You didn't want to have a child, you didn't have to have a child. Now, even though some people in the community wanted to have children and then they believed that if they could live in this community together, then they could raise the children together. But Rajneesh did not like that. He believed that a child should only be raised by their own parents. So he didn't believe in marriage, but he believed that a child should be raised only by the parents and not by a community. Many people did not like this idea, but unfortunately, because they were living in his community, they had to follow his rule. His teachings fit perfectly with this mindset, and around this time, he also started asking people to call him Shri Bhagwan. Yes, you heard me right. He asked his followers to call him Shri Bhagwan. And that's why I said in the beginning, later on in this episode, we will be referring to him as Bhagwan for this very same reason. As his influence grew, more and more people started calling him Shri Bhagwan or Bhagwan Rajneesh. He became famous for writing books, gathering followers, and giving speeches to huge crowds. Some of his talks were attended by 20,000 to 30,000 people. Life in the community was not as free-willed as it initially seemed. They had to follow a very strict rule. Members would wake up at 6 a.m. and they would practice dynamic meditation, the same 4 steps that I told you. After that, at 8 a.m., Rajneesh would go on to give a lecture. And then the rest of the day would go on to doing work, meditation, yoga, whatever people wanted to do. Rajneesh was always more than happy to welcome people. And people happily flooded in. And remember, Rajneesh loved talking. So the more he talked, the more people were inspired and the more people were coming in. Not just Indian people, but foreigners too. Everyone was flooding in. Rajneesh and the ashram were getting money through these foreign followers. People who were already living in the ashram were working very hard to produce clothing, accessories, footwear, anything that was needed. And at the same time, they had to follow all these strict rules, but they were living together as a community. By 1979, it had been almost 10 years since he started this movement. Rajneesh's followers had grown so much that his community needed more space. His followers decided that it was time to build a self-sustaining town, a town where they all could live together, support each other, and follow whatever they wanted to follow as long as Rajneesh approved of it. People who attended his teachings had to pay a fee, and there was also a gift shop where people could buy products that had his name or his logo or his face on it. This was also said to be one of the ways that he made a lot of money. However, over time, opinions about the Rajneesh movement started to change. Some of the therapy practices in the commune became very controversial. As said, everything had to go through him. At first, the commune seemed to be a place for self-discovery and enlightenment. But soon, outsiders started to look at it differently. People started to ask the question whether this movement was actually peaceful and loving, or was it something else? And as the commune grew, troubling reports began to emerge. Some of the therapy sessions would encourage people to express their emotions freely. Sometimes it was just screaming and shouting or maybe hitting a wall. But in some cases, it led to violence. There were cases where women were physically hurt, and some people even accused members of sexual assault during these sessions. Now remember, Rajneesh preached about the lack of rules and boundaries. That's what made this place very popular. That's what made him popular. And because of lack of rules, anything was possible. People were getting assaulted left, right, and center, and there was nothing that anyone could do about it. By this time, Rajneesh had about 1,500 followers living in the commune. Most of these people had left their old lives behind just to join the movement. And because of this, space was an issue. There were too many people sitting in one place. And because of this, they had to find a land that was bigger. Rajneesh's secretary, Lakshmi, was given the task of looking for a specific location. She traveled to different cities, including Delhi and Bombay, just to look for a place that could accommodate so many people. Despite all these challenges, Rajneesh's movement still grew and more people were coming, and he needed a bigger space. During this time, India was led by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and she did not like and support the Rajneesh movement. People were starting to see the Rajneesh movement, and because of a lot of political reasons as well as because of this movement, Lakshmi, Rajneesh's secretary, was having a very hard time in trying to find land. The land that he already had was not enough to fit the amount of people that were still flooding in. So he wanted something bigger. And unfortunately, in India, nobody was ready to sell their land to him. In the Netflix documentary Wild Wild Country, Ma Sheila would go on to say that Rajneesh called her in one day and asked her if Lakshmi was the best person to help him find land. And Ma Sheila would say that no, she didn't believe that Lakshmi could help. And that is when Rajneesh asked her if she had any ideas. And because Ma Sheila had initially studied in the US, and she knew that US was open to all of this. In fact, US was open to any religion. People could practice any religion they wanted in the United States. And that's why she believed that the Rajneesh movement could thrive in the US. She quickly told him that she would help him find land, and soon he would go on to replace Lakshmi with Ma Sheila. She was very devout to him, and knowing that now she was his right hand made her very happy. While Sheila was searching for land in the US, Rajneesh made a surprising choice. He took a vow of silence. This shocked his followers because everyone were coming from all parts of the world just to listen to him talk. And now he had decided that he would not talk. Without any words to guide them, they had no idea what to do. After searching for the right location, Sheila found a tiny town in Oregon called Antelope. It had only 40 residents, but a lot of space, about 100,000 square feet of farmland. Sheila thought that this was the perfect place for them to build a new home. But when applying to buy the land, she told the local government that they would use this land only for farming. She of course lied, and she of course did not tell them how many people would be moving there. The town's mayor approved the sale without knowing exactly what they were going to do there. This town that Rajneesh and Sheila wanted to build would later be called as Rajneeshpuram. It was on the site of a 64,281 acre Central Oregon property known as the Big Muddy Ranch near Antelope. It was purchased by Sheila's husband, John Shelfer, in 1981 for $5.75 million. In today's rate, it would be $19.9 million. After checking everything related to the land, once she returned to India, the first thing she did was divide people into groups so that they could go to the US in separate flights and in separate batches. She didn't want this whole group of people wearing the same colored clothes walking into an airport and then in one flight. Imagine a whole group of people in pink sitting in one flight. That would attract a lot of attention. So she decided to put people into small groups so that they could slowly go one by one and then settle in. Now, there were people from several countries for whom this travel was very easy. But for people from countries like India, it was very difficult to get visa. And so these people had to travel in secret. As this relocation was going on, Rajneesh quietly left. Sheila had no idea, and so she decided that this was the time that she would step up and show Rajneesh that she was the person to be trusted with. When she initially bought the land, she told them that this land would only be used for farming. But she had something else in mind. Once all the followers had reached the location, that is when Ma Sheila started. As said before, she had people of almost all professions there: doctors, nurses, teachers, construction workers, lawyers, any profession you can think of, people were there. And so they quickly got to work. She gave tasks to people who knew how to do them, and they started building houses. Now remember, the land that they had bought, their neighbors were very few and they all knew each other. And so these neighbors would later go on to say that when they woke up one morning, they saw this whole group of people wearing the same colored clothes walking around, and that freaked them out. And then they would soon see trucks carrying these portable houses and then going into the community. And after that, it was all about construction. They could hear the noises, they could hear a lot of things, and it kind of scared them. Ma Sheila would go on to say that her whole goal was to build this beautiful community where people would live together and live happily. The original things that Rajneesh preached. After they had built this city, they would go on to call it Rajneeshpuram. After 2 years of people settling into Rajneeshpuram, Rajneesh would come in. He came in his Rolls Royce, looking in his perfect condition, but one thing was different. He had taken a vow of silence. Now, people in his community came to him because they wanted to hear him speak. They wanted to hear the knowledgeable words that he had to share. But now that he had taken a vow of silence, his people didn't know what to do. They were in this foreign country, they had set up this whole place, and now he has come years later and he was not talking. By the time he returned, his people had built everything. They had schools, they had a hospital, they had a courthouse. They also had a runway with his own flight so that people could come in and go out from directly inside the campsite. Now at this time, when Rajneesh came, he was not just this guy who was going around talking. By now, he had become very rich. People had given him a lot of money. He had also sold out a lot of books on his teachings. He had his interviews, he had his voice recordings, he had everything. He had a lot of money. And if you saw him at that time, you would see that he always came and went in a Rolls Royce. And he just didn't have one Rolls Royce, he had multiple. And in the future, he would go on to have even more. He would go on to wear these expensive Rolex watches, and he was living his beautiful life in the best way possible, while the people who were under him were kind of struggling. They wouldn't complain, but they were actually struggling because, as said, they had strict rules, they had to work, they had to do everything that they would have done in the outside world. But unfortunately, that was how Rajneeshpuram was working. At first, life in the commune seemed peaceful, but soon problems started to happen between Bhagwan's followers and the people in Antelope. Antelope was a very small town, as said, just 40 people. But suddenly, their quiet home was filled with thousands of strangers, and people in Antelope did not like that. They were used to having this quiet place where they could farm and live a very happy life. But now, there was a whole town right next to them. The way the followers behaved also made the locals very uncomfortable. They believed that the followers were brainwashed and were acting strangely. Some townspeople even reported that they saw public displays of affection and sexual activity in places where children played. At night, they would hear sounds of strange chantings and loud celebrations coming from the commune. But unfortunately, they couldn't do anything about it. The people of Antelope were worried that Rajneeshpuram was headed in the same direction that a few years ago Jonestown had gone to. I don't want to go too deep into Jonestown because that itself is a very, very long story which would go up to 3 to 4 episodes easily. Jonestown massacre was basically a town which is very similar to Rajneeshpuram, which was run by a man named Jim Jones. He initially started preaching in the church, and then he had his own group of people whom he would preach to. He bought a land and he built his own community, and he got people working and doing things for him in this community. But that ended in a very huge tragedy. That's why it's known as the Jonestown tragedy or the Jonestown massacre. People were afraid that if they didn't stop Rajneeshpuram, then it could end up like Jonestown. And they were afraid that these people might do something. If you want me to do a complete deep dive into the Jonestown massacre, do let me know in the comments. So coming back, people in Antelope were afraid. They didn't want what happened in Jonestown to happen to them. And so they reached out to the government and asked for help. But unfortunately, the government couldn't do anything. Because as said, they were not breaking any rules. They could follow any religion they wanted, and they were not harming anyone. They were living within their small community, and they were working and enjoying their life within the small community. So basically, people had nothing to worry about. As tensions grew, a filmmaker secretly recorded one of the commune's therapy sessions. These sessions were supposed to help people release their emotions. But they soon turned violent. People screamed, fought, and even used wooden weapons. And when the documentary came out, people were shocked. And more than that were the people of Antelope. The people of Antelope did not want the Rajneeshis to take over their town. But instead of backing down, Bhagwan's followers started harassing the locals. It was kind of a war that was going on between the two. The Rajneeshis would shine their flashlights into their homes at night and would even film the people of Antelope whenever they left their house. More long-term residents felt pressured. They were scared that something might happen to them or their families, and that's why a lot of people ended up just selling their houses and their land and leaving. But even though a lot of people left, there were a small group of people who refused to give up their town. No matter what the Rajneeshis did, they were not ready to leave. They wanted to take control. Now, because the Rajneeshis could not take control of these people by trying to scare them off, they decided to register themselves as official residents of Antelope so that they could vote in the local elections. And because they were already a lot of people, they had easily outnumbered the Antelope people. Now remember, people in Antelope were already very less in number, and many of them had already sold their homes. So the Rajneeshis could easily win this election. It was just the beginning of their plan to take over not just Antelope, but the entire region. The more the Rajneesh community grew, the worse things got with the local people. At first, Sheila had told the officials that the land would only be used for farming, which was of course a lie. The Rajneeshis built an entire city with airport, hospitals, banks, hotels, anything you can think of. And of course, the locals were upset. So before the Rajneeshis arrived, Antelope had around 40 citizens. But after they came, everything changed. The Rajneeshis had already outnumbered the people in Antelope, but now they wanted to grow even more. They wanted more land, and that's why they wanted to put Bhagwan's name in the ballot. This was during the town's mayoral election. Since so many voters had put his name, he easily won. After this, everything changed. People were required to wear similar colors like red, pink, orange, and they also had to change the street names. In 1983, the town was officially renamed as Rajneeshpuram. The people didn't just stop there. In Portland, they would go on to buy a hotel and they would go on to name it as the Rajneeshi Hotel. This made the local people even more scared because now they were sure that these people were a part of a cult and they were afraid that what happened with Jonestown was going to happen again. Around this time, Sheila started to notice that people did not like what they were doing, and she was afraid that someone might come and attack them. Now, I'm not sure if someone threatened her and that's why she was afraid. She didn't tell this in her interview, so I'm not sure why she felt that this had to be done, but she got some people in their group to start training. She got guns like AK-47 and they started training. They were ready for battle. I don't understand why they wanted to do this battle, why she thought that this battle was necessary, but people were getting ready. As said before, initially the whole teachings of Rajneesh was to help each other. But we don't know how it just changed. Rajneesh had taken a vow of silence, and here Ma Sheila was trying to teach people how to use AK-47. Rajneeshpuram also had its own police station and military base, so people had access to military guns and they were all ready. By 1983, the Rajneesh movement had around 500,000 followers worldwide, with thousands of them living in Rajneeshpuram. Every year they would have this huge festival where people traveled from all over the world just to see Bhagwan. Even though he rarely spoke, they just wanted to be in his presence. These festivals, along with donations from followers who had given up all their money, made Rajneesh and his group very rich. In just 2 years, the Rajneesh organization collected around $65 million. In today's money, it would be worth around $173 million. Their wealth, independence, power, everything was growing, and it was making the local people very scared. The situation in Antelope kept getting worse. The Rajneeshis were becoming bigger and louder and more powerful. And then one day, a long-time resident of Antelope was riding his horse when he noticed something in the trash. He was curious. He wanted to know what was there in the trash bin, and as he started searching, he saw this one poster from Rajneeshpuram. And he thought, let's just take it, it's a nice collection. But as he picked up the poster, he saw something else. Beneath the poster was a whole pile of documents, and in each document it was written shred. I'm assuming that the person who was in charge of shredding was just too lazy because the amount of documents that were retrieved were too many. And so maybe this person just threw it and then put a poster on top thinking that no one was going to look at it. But unfortunately for him, they did. The documents that were collected had a lot of information on them. Immigration fraud, tax evasion, anything illegal you can think of, it was there in those documents. And in those documents, it was clearly written that Bhagwan, Rajneesh, was in US on an illegal visa. And on the papers, it was also mentioned that the Rajneeshis had millions of dollars. They had built an airport, they had a bank, they had a police station, they had a runway with a flight. So you can imagine. But the main question that people started asking was, where were these people getting the money from? They of course had festivals. So these Rajneeshis would have these yearly festivals where all the Rajneeshi believers from all over the world would come together. But they had that once a year. How come they had millions of dollars to sustain them throughout the year? That was a very big question. At the same time, an important election was coming up in Wasco County. Since the Rajneeshis had already controlled Antelope, this was just an extension of their power. They knew that they could easily do this because that's exactly what they did with Antelope. Rajneesh decided to run for mayor. This was a big deal. Winning in Vasco County didn't just mean controlling a small town of 40 people, it meant having power over a huge area. And if they succeeded, there was no telling how far they would go. To increase their chances of winning, the Rajneeshis came up with a new plan. They decided that they would get even more voters. They sent their members to big cities like Chicago, Texas, and New Jersey to look for homeless people. They promised these people food, shelter, and a community where they would be welcomed. Many homeless people were desperate and they decided that they would come. Since many of the Rajneeshis were immigrants and couldn't vote, bringing in these American homeless people was the best plan. By 1984, as the election got closer, tensions were high. People in Antelope were now scared because the Rajneeshis were not only bigger in number when it came to immigrants, they now had brought in more homeless people. A few days before the election, the Rajneeshis brought a whole group of these homeless people because homeless people were still American citizens and they could vote. They brought them in, they gave them food, they gave them clothing, they gave them a good place to sleep, and that was what they wanted. Their plan was to cheat the system because remember, most of the people in Rajneeshpuram were not Americans. Many people started to see that the leaders of the group were not interested in helping people, especially Sheila. All they wanted to do was take control of more area in the country. This all finding homeless people, bringing in, giving them food and shelter was not a way for them to help, but a way for them to get more power. That was not something that he taught. He openly welcomed anyone who wanted to come and join his commune. But now, it seemed as if they were bringing people for the wrong reasons, and who knows, Sheila might have had even this plan of throwing them out after the whole election was done. As the election approached, things got even tense. The Rajneeshis had so many people in the area that even if they all voted, they could easily take over the county. Many long-time residents were scared that if Bhagwan won, he would change everything, including the rules. And what if they had to live like Bhagwan's people? What if they had to wear the same type of clothes? What if they had to do all these prayers and chanting? They were scared. Now, while they were going to vote, one man got really upset when he was told that he could not vote, and he created a huge chaos over there. He lost his temper and he caught Sheila by her neck and started to strangle her. The Rajneeshi police who were standing right there did nothing to stop them. It was not until the medical staff arrived that Ma Sheila was freed. At that moment, Sheila realized that this whole thing was spinning out of control. As if things weren't bad for the community enough, one journalist came to interview and check out the place, and when he came inside the community, he realized that they had a military tank. He didn't know what they were going to use this tank for. But imagine a military tank. When he asked Sheila why was this tank there, initially she said that she had no idea, it was just there, but later she said it was for protection, and this scared the journalist. But unfortunately, they couldn't do anything about it. As they kept investigating, the reporters noticed 3 large buildings on the property. When they asked to go inside, the Rajneeshis refused. They said that they didn't have the keys. The buildings were locked up, and this made the reporters even more suspicious. Why would they not have the keys of a place that they built? As the election got closer, things became even worse. Just 28 days before the vote, a town in Vasco County called the Dalles had a major health crisis. Over 700 people got sick from salmonella poisoning. Many believed that the Rajneeshis had something to do with this, but there was no proof. The media couldn't officially blame the group, but everyone knew that it was the Rajneeshis. People would later go on to say that the group had hoped to contaminate 10 salad bars. They wanted people to be so sick that they would not be able to vote, and that the Rajneeshis would easily win because no one turned up. Unfortunately for the Rajneeshis, their plan did not work because the Dallas city had their own two candidates who would win the elections. The contamination was successful. It hospitalized 45 people, but their plan didn't work. Around this time, the Rajneesh community started attracting rich and famous people. They called this group the Hollywood people. These were wealthy celebrities who wanted to be close to Bhagwan. They would give him expensive gifts like diamond watches and jewelry, and Bhagwan, who loved luxury, happily took it. This change made Sheila jealous. She had always been the closest person to Bhagwan, and now, seeing that these Hollywood figures were getting closer to him, she couldn't take it anymore. Now, after getting attacked by this homeless man, Bhagwan, not ready to talk, he had taken his vow of silence, and people were getting out of control. Sheila had no idea what to do. Sheila became even more scared when one day she overheard Bhagwan talking to one of his Hollywood buddies, where he was talking to them about doomsday. He said that he had this whole doomsday bunker, but Sheila had no idea about this. And the thing that scared Sheila the most was that she found out Bhagwan was using drugs, and she had no idea about this. Sheila always wanted to protect Bhagwan and the Rajneesh community, but things started to get worse. She started to worry that Bhagwan might be deported because of visa problems. A man named Mr. Turner was in charge of deciding if Bhagwan would stay in the US or not. If Bhagwan decided to leave, the entire community might collapse. In her panic, she even suggested that maybe they should try something as an act of violence. She didn't tell the people exactly whom to target, but she got people to start practicing with their weapons. As time passed, Sheila became even more scared. Bhagwan's mental state seemed to be getting worse, and the Hollywood group had even more influence on him. Desperate to know what was really going on, Sheila secretly installed listening devices in Bhagwan's room. She overheard so much conversation about the doomsday plan, his drug use, him wanting to end himself. She was scared. She tried to talk to him, but Bhagwan didn't listen. He told Sheila that she had to stay out of it. While all of this was happening, the Rajneesh community was also facing legal trouble. A team of 20 lawyers had been working with the Rajneeshis on different legal issues. But things took a serious turn when immigration officials arrived at their compound. They had documentation showing that Bhagwan might be involved in marriage fraud. Sheila was shocked. Now remember, Bhagwan always said that he didn't believe in marriage. He believed that parents had to look after their own child, raise their own child, but he never believed in marriage. People could have sex if they wanted, but not marriage. And knowing that Bhagwan himself was married just so he could live in the US was something that scared and shocked Sheila. This would only make his legal problems even more worse. Many people in the Rajneesh group weren't US citizens. They had come from countries like Germany, India, and Denmark and needed a way to live in America legally. And the only way that they could do that was to marry American citizens. This, of course, went against everything that Bhagwan taught. But what could they do? If they had to live in the US, they had to get married. So this is how it worked. A person who wasn't an American citizen would marry an American citizen. They would live together for a specific period of time where they will show that they are in love, they are living this happy married life, and the government would send in people to come and check. And once everything was approved, the person would become an American citizen. And then, once the citizenship was approved, the person would come back and join the cult. Now, Sheila realized that if all the people went to just one place and registered their marriage, then it would be suspicious. Imagine they are still wearing their uniform. So, if all of them went to one place to register, it would be suspicious. So, once again, like last time, Sheila divided people into groups and told them you have to go to these places and then get registered. Now, Bhagwan's visa was also questioned because initially, when he applied to be a spiritual leader. And the whole goal of being a spiritual leader is to talk and spread the word of God. But Bhagwan had taken a vow of silence. So, how was he going to talk if he was going to be silent? By February of 1984, Bhagwan's team was fighting. They wanted him to stay in the country. It was a very long legal battle, but finally, he was allowed to stay in the US. But even after all of this, the government started having doubts. And one main person in this was Mr. Turner. Mr. Turner had the final say whether Bhagwan would live in the US or not. Now Sheila was scared because if Bhagwan left the country, everything would fall apart. Who was going to preach? Who was going to look after them? They came to the US so that they could be with him. But if he was deported from the US, who was going to help them all? And that's when Sheila came up with this idea that she was going to end Mr. Turner. She decided to choose a woman named Shanti who would carry out this plan. Shanti had grown up in a family that was very good with hunting, so Shanti knew how to use a gun. Sheila believed that if Mr. Turner was gone, then Bhagwan could stay in the US. She didn't think that if Mr. Turner was gone, then someone else would take his place. Made me question a lot about what this cult was thinking about. Now, once Shanti was given the orders, there was nothing she could do because she had to listen to Ma Sheila. The next morning, Shanti was told to meet at an apartment in Portland. When she got there, the place was almost empty, except for some clothes in the closet. She was given regular street clothes instead of the usual Rajneesh red outfit. Then she got into the car with someone who had a collection of guns. Shanti picked a small handgun because it would be easy to hide. They drove to Mr. Turner's workplace and waited in the parking lot. Shanti was supposed to wait for him and as soon as he comes, shoot him. But Mr. Turner, luckily, never came to work that day. Shanti and the others waited, but he never came. And finally, they decided to go back home. She told Sheila that the plan had failed. Sheila was disappointed, but she didn't seem too upset. She said maybe they could find another chance. Meanwhile, Bhagwan was becoming more and more distant with his followers. He no longer greeted the new members or led any therapy sessions. He just spent most of his time with his new wealthy friends. As the election got closer, the Rajneesh community faced more problems. A journalist traveled to India to find out why Rajneesh left his home country and moved to Oregon. The journalist found out that Bhagwan had not just left the country because he wanted a bigger space, but he left the country because he was wanted in India for serious crimes like gold smuggling, tax fraud, and arson. The journalist also found financial records showing that the Rajneeshis had spent huge amounts of money to build this community. They had paid for things like an airport, banks, houses, and expensive clothes. As all these secrets came out, the people started to see that their perfect community wasn't that perfect. The Rajneeshis had believed that they were living in peace and love, but they had no idea that the base of all of this was lies and corruption. The first person to leave the community was Sheila, and it all started when Bhagwan told his followers that he was going to die on July 6th. This shocked everyone. Now, during all of this, Sheila was quietly recording Bhagwan's words. She wanted to know what he was up to, and that is when she found out that he was planning to take an injection, a lethal injection, and end himself. This lethal injection was supposed to be given to him on July 6th. Around this time, Shanti failed to kill Mr. Turner. He was supposed to come to a place where Shanti was supposed to kill him, but unfortunately for Shanti and fortunately for Mr. Turner, he didn't come in that day and Shanti just went back. Now that Sheila knew that Bhagwan's doctor was going to give him this lethal injection, she decided that she was going to end the doctor so that he would not harm Bhagwan. What she did was got Shanti to go and steal a syringe from the hospital with some lethal dosage and then end the doctor. The plan was to do it during the morning meditation time, because at that time people would have their eyes covered and they would be deeply meditating and no one would notice anything. And that's exactly what Shanti did. The next morning, Shanti went in with the plan. While everyone was blindfolded, she quietly moved from the side, went in to see the doctor, and then stabbed him with the syringe. When the blindfolds were removed, people saw the doctor on the ground and he was dead. In the Netflix documentary, Shanti would go on to say that this was the point when she realized that she had gone too far. She had done everything that she was against. She had joined the community to escape from her abusive marriage. But now, look at where she had reached. Feeling guilty, Shanti decided that she wanted to leave this community. And along with her, Sheila and few others also wanted to do so. At first, people were all loyal to Bhagwan. They wanted to listen to him. They wanted to believe in everything that he was saying. But as time passed on in the community, they realized that Bhagwan was not following what he was preaching. And so they decided to leave together. Not all of them, a small group of them. This would be the beginning of the community's downfall. Sheila had always been the one holding the community together. She was the spokesperson for Rajneesh. She was the one who directed what people did. But after she left, more and more people started to leave. And this shocked Bhagwan. Without her, there was no one to speak for him, no one to pass on rules. And after 4 years of silence, he spoke to the media. He blamed Sheila for everything. The one person who supported him, the one person who did everything for him, and the one person who had gone to the extent of getting someone killed. He blamed her for everything. He said that she was the one who had manipulated everyone. She was the one who was responsible for all these illegal activities, including marriage fraud. By then, Sheila had already disappeared with a group of people, and no one knew where she was. And then, something unbelievable happened. Sheila appeared completely naked in a German magazine. This shocked everyone, and the media went wild. Sheila would go on to say that she felt brainwashed during her time in the community. She had been with Bhagwan since she was 16 years old, and now she was 33 and she was struggling to understand what happened to her. After the magazine came out, authorities started searching for Sheila and the group that was with her. When they raided her house, they found 10,000 wiretap tapes hidden under her house. These tapes contained recordings of Bhagwan's private conversation, including everything that he wanted to do. Rajneesh now realized that he could no longer push all the blame on Sheila. People had proof. The police had proof. He told his followers that they could wear whatever they wanted because this whole dress code idea was Sheila's, not his. I mean, the dress code was there, I guess, before Sheila came, but I'm not sure why. But he told everyone that it was Sheila's idea, and now that Sheila was gone, they could wear whatever they wanted. This confused many people, especially since they had followed all these strict rules for several years and Bhagwan was with them while these strict rules were going on. And now he was telling everyone was free. As the investigation continued, a man named KD, who had been very close to Bhagwan, gave some crucial information to the police. KD, who was under pressure, told that all of this wiretapping, illegal immigration, and a disturbing plan involving Salmonella all came from the Rajneesh community. The case against Sheila grew stronger. with charges of attempted murder, immigration fraud, and conspiracy. Meanwhile, Bhagwan's arrest was also near. The authorities knew that this was a tough job and they had to catch him before he left the country. Sheila would later be found in Germany. She would be arrested and sent back to Portland. After the trial, she would face charges for a role in the illegal activities of the Rajneesh community. As Bhagwan sat on his flight and it started to take off, the authorities somehow caught hold and then he had to be deplaned. It was said that he was hiding behind one of the plane seats when they caught him. He was handcuffed and removed from the plane. When he left Rajneeshpuram, he would go on to say that he had no idea where he was going or what was going to happen to him. And after he was arrested, Rajneeshpuram came to an end. But not his cult. Just the land and the people living there, they had to be moved. But not his cult. After Bhagwan's arrest, he was told that he could leave the US after he paid a fine of $500,000. Now remember, Bhagwan was very rich, so this was nothing for him. In 1986, Ma Anand Sheela was sentenced to 20 years in a Californian prison after pleading guilty to charges of attempted murder, assault, arson, electronic eavesdropping, immigration fraud, and conspiracy. She was ordered to pay $470,000 and paroled after 4 years. Sheila and her cult members had managed to carry out America's first recorded bioterror attack in 1984 when the group poisoned 751 people in Oregon with salmonella. After everything that happened, Sheila still defended Bhagwan. Even to this day, if you listen to the documentary, you will easily see that Sheila still follows everything that Bhagwan said. A year into a prison sentence, she gave an interview where she said that she still loved him. She was still devoted to his teachings and she still believed. With Rajneesh arrested, Sheila gone, people of course had to leave and go. What happened to the area? After Bhagwan's arrest, the previous mayor once again won the race. They officially changed the name from Rajneesh to Antelope and the people were more than happy. In fact, you can see the picture here where people are happily removing the name and changing it. All the members one by one left and went back to where they had come from. Dennis R. Washington's firm, Washington Construction, purchased the Big Muddy Ranch, which is Rajneeshpuram, for $3.6 million in 1991. He attempted to run the ranch for profit, but later on it would be turned into a state park. In 1996, he donated the ranch to Young Life, a Christian youth organization. Since 1999, Young Life has operated a summer camp. There are 2 camps on the property today. Although Rajneeshpuram is no longer what it used to be, you can still visit it. The original idea of loving everyone, no matter the gender, no matter the race, no matter the background, I wouldn't say that was the best idea, but that was a lot better than what it ended up being. The community's downfall came when everyone turned to lies, illegal actions, and manipulation. And the worst part of all was that Bhagwan was in the center of this. Even though he didn't believe in marriage, he used marriage fraud and other crimes, while his followers continued to support whatever he taught them, although he himself never followed it. In 1990, Bhagwan would go back to India, and that is where he changed his name to Osho. He still spoke, he still gave his spiritual teachings, he still had everything going on for him, just that not the whole cult aspect of it. He died from natural causes in 1990, still keeping his vow of silence. As said, this is believed to be a very dangerous cult because if they were not stopped at the right time, God knows where they would have reached. They had a military tank inside, so just imagine, where would they have reached? They had poisoned people, they tried to kill people, all for what? Their initial belief was just to be happy, make other people happy, but where did they end up? Unfortunately, the cult of Rajneesh still is active in India. They are not that open today as they were before, but it still exists. There are members who get together often, they start talking, they start listening to his older video recordings, audio recordings, his preachings, but it's not that wide. Before we end this episode, I found a few victim testimonies and I will be narrating them to you. Because of my agricultural experience, I was one of the first people to go to Rajneeshpuram. My job then was to take the land, which had been totally neglected and overgrazed, and getting the basics of agriculture started. Very soon after, I had many disagreements with Sheila. I never got on with her. It didn't feel to me like she was intelligent. Even she was cunning, clever, but not intelligent. The arguments were about policy. She said we should have chickens because we'd need a lot of eggs. And I said, yeah, we should have them all scattered around. And she said, no, put them all together. And I said, then you have the likelihood of disease and you will need to give them antibiotics. And she said, so give them antibiotics. And that was really not my way. I was an organic farmer, and there were many profound disagreements. I think this will give you a brief idea of how Ma Sheila was actually running the place. And she kind of took this whole control to herself. And even though I'm telling you that in the end, Rajneesh completely went against her after she left, she was literally running the place. Another person, Leela, would go on to say, when I first arrived in America and we were in Antelope, and I sat there on the bus looking around, I thought to myself, what the hell are we doing here? It was immediately obvious that we were in a very strange place to be bringing ourselves, because these are country people, very settled in their ways and strong in their beliefs, and they ain't going to move an inch. When we came there to dance around and be jolly and build a whole city, and I could sense that it was not going to be easy. It was immediately obvious that we were in a strange place to be bringing ourselves. The first year in America was okay, though context was strange, because we were out of India and we weren't as close as we were in Pune. And then the energy began to change. For the first year I was there, I was the coordinator of the welding shop. And then they moved me to work in legal services. I knew nothing about law and didn't like being in the law department because I felt it was like a war game of mind. The longer we went into this year, the final year, I kept feeling uneasy about a lot of things. There was a lot of secrecy. There were a lot of people feeling afraid to say anything. For me personally, it became quite stressful. Can you imagine you start in a community in India where you are all growing and thriving and sharing about yourselves and growing beautifully and spiritually. And here we have a police force guarding us when we are in the meditation hall? It was just too weird. When the Netflix documentary Wild Wild Country came out, so many people came forward with their own stories. Now, if I get to read, I think it will become a whole episode in itself. So let me know if you want me to do a complete episode on people's experiences in Rajneeshpuram. Basically, if you see, a lot of people would have similar experiences, but do let me know if you want me to do an entire episode just talking about people's experiences, and I think that would be a very interesting topic. There are so many articles, recordings, and interviews from victims. I'll be linking most of them in the description. You can read them, you can listen to them, you can watch them. And as you see, there is a pattern because almost everyone has gone through something similar. There is something that I noticed in the documentary, and this is my opinion alone, but throughout the documentary, Sheila talks as if she's proud of what she did. She refers to herself as Osho's bride. Like, she literally called herself Osho's bride. She even says that she should get a Nobel Prize for whatever they had built. She was, of course, following whatever Rajneesh wanted, but the whole idea of building things from scratch, that was her idea. And she believes that she should get a Nobel Prize for this. The people in Antelope would go on to say that the people in Rajneeshpuram thought very highly of themselves, and this could end up being dangerous. Once again, referencing Jonestown. Now here I want to mention something which was in the documentary, and it really scared me. Congressman Ryan had gone to Jonestown to meet Jim Jones, and that was where he was murdered. His very own daughter, when she got his life insurance money, took that money and went and joined Rajneesh's cult. And she gave all that money to Rajneesh. When she asked what her father would have thought about this if he was alive, she said that her father would have been proud because Rajneesh is not like Jim Jones, and that Rajneeshpuram is not like Jonestown. Now, I would like to mention here that her father was not a part of the Jonestown cult. He just unfortunately died there, but no, he was not a part of it, and she believes that her father would have been proud that she joined this cult. When the documentary ended, Sheila seemed happy. She didn't show any sign of fear or shame or regret. When she was asked about the salmonella poisoning, she openly said, "Why should I feel bad about people falling sick? People fall sick all around the world." It just shows you how detached she is from reality. As said, when Sheila managed to escape, Rajneesh pinned everything on her, but he also said that there is no religion, which is the most shocking part. It's not just about, I never told you to wear these clothes, I never told you to follow this. He said there is no religion. There is no religion of Rajneesh. There is no religion of Rajneeshpuram. You can just listen to me and you can follow whatever you want to do. In fact, he got a lot of books that were written about him, which he made money out of. Mind you, he made money out of selling those books. He got all these books and he burnt them, and he said, there is no religion. Sheila in an interview would go on to say, she never started the religion, she never started this cult, she never said anything about the cloth colors. Rajneesh did. And Rajneesh would say that it was Sheila. This whole thing started as a place where people could share their love, but ended up in pure chaos. I would like to know from you overall, what do you think, and should I make more cult cases? Until then, stay kind, stay safe, and see you next week. A big thank you to all my fellow listeners who have been listening and supporting this episode. Your reviews, your listens mean a lot. If you love this episode, if you love the stories that I put out, then please do leave a rating on whichever podcasting platform you're listening from. It would really mean the world to me. Other than this, I also have a YouTube and an Instagram page. I'll link it in the description. Do check it out. I have different stories on Instagram, and I'm planning to put out some short horror stories on YouTube. So do subscribe to my YouTube channel and stay tuned. I am also an author, love fiction stories. If you want to check out my free fiction book, I'll link it in the description. I'll also link my other account in the description, where I talk about fiction writing, travel, and I also will soon start sharing fiction stories. So stay tuned. So do follow me there. Thank you so much for everything. That's all for this week. Stay kind, stay safe, and see you next week.